Okay, so I think that this is going to be, let me just check. This is episode 32, A Wealthy Life and Practice. Again, there's a massive time lag on the video, not sure why, but anyway, let's roll with it. Hello and welcome to A Wealthy Life. In this episode, I want to talk to you about a wealthy life in practice, what it means to live a wealthy life. And I'm going to do that by sharing some examples of clients that I've worked with, people that I know, and that will help you really sort of start to understand what a wealthy life might mean for you so that you can make it your own. If you remember back to episodes 12 to 16, I talked you through the 5 principles of a wealthy life. So I'm not going to go through those in a great deal of detail, but if when you're listening to this podcast, one of them you need a bit of a refresher on, you can go back to episodes 12 to 16 and pick up whichever one of the specific principles that you want to listen more to. And that's a really important point to share with you. So I've basically only been able to ever reflect on my own life, my own experience as a way to make sense of the world and share the insights that I've gained as I've moved through my ancient life as it is now. And in doing that, I am a meaning-making machine. So I have tried to make sense of my life. And I've done that in this very specific iteration, because there have been many versions of this as I've come to get greater and greater understanding of it. In this version of it, it is a wealthy life. That is the name that encapsulates it. I'm not sure how I can do better than that. And then thinking back at how I've reached the point that I've reached at, which is one where I am content with my life, but not so content that I'm still not looking to move forward. And that's where I evolved the concept of having enough, more than enough, and much more than enough. And there'll be podcast episodes on that. But then I looked at, well, how did I get to this position? How can I unpack it? And you'll remember in the episode last week, I was talking to you about working out how your thoughts are, and then you can work your way back through the thought chain. So effectively, I've done that. And I've come up with the fact that for me, there are 4 habits of truly wealthy people. And when I unpacked those 4 habits, it was based on 5 principles. And the 5 principles are being clear about what you want, because without clarity, there is no roadmap, there is no direction. Being in control, and for me, that is very much about financial control. As you evolve around the circle that the 5 principles create and the 4 habits create, you can come back round and it might mean different things to you in different lives. So when you're fully in control of your finances, maybe what you want to do is get in control of your mindset. And when you're in control of your finances and your mindset, the next time round, you might be more in control of your business and your investments. So clarity, control. And then it's very much about understanding the assets that you have, the assets that you have access to, and the assets that you can control without ownership. And then looking at how they perform, because then you're looking to leverage them. So you have resources, these are your assets, and leverage, which is where you're making sure that those resources are working for you, and ultimately legacy. And I spoke about legacy a couple of weeks ago. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go through these principles, and I'm going to share with you very briefly some stories, as I say, of clients that I've worked with, people that I know, so that you can get a sense of a wealthy life in practice. Okay. So really this episode, if you want to summarize it, is what you need to know to create a successful business and live a wealthy life. And at the end of it, you're going to be in a position where you will be able to identify your strategy And of course, if you're still struggling, you know I'm always here. You know that you can book a call. You just need to get in touch. So let's start with a question which is going to be tying us into clarity as the very first principle. And clarity is about knowing why you want to do this. And I think one of the questions I would ask you if we were having a conversation is, what's more important to you right now, time or money? And there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's absolutely fine, whichever you answer. There will be times in your life where money is more important, times in your life where time is more important, and you may actually swing backwards and forwards between these two concepts. But at the end of it, you really need to understand the role that time or money or your priorities, if we now change the word, that your priorities are playing in your life, and therefore your priorities is effectively, it's your destination, it's your goal, it's what you're working towards, how everything else is coming together. If you don't know what it is that you want to achieve, how will we then know whether you are sufficiently in control of your time, your money, your resources, or anything else? How will we know whether you are leveraging the right resources? How will we know whether you're being successful? We won't, because we've got nothing to measure it against. We've got no journey. We don't know that it's going to take you 2 hours to drive to your destination and that you're 1 hour in. We won't know that you're halfway there. So understanding this is all part of that first step of clarity. And remember, I've said to you that these 5 principles create a circle. And in creating a circle, it means that at any point you can come all the way around and start again with fresh eyes, if you like, because having been round the circle once and then you come back and you go round it again, you have greater understanding. And therefore, the same question, if I asked you this question, what's more important to you, time or money? And then you go through the whole process, and then in, say, a month from now, I ask you the same question, your answer will be different because you'll have a deeper understanding. And one really useful tool, and I'll say it now and I'll say it again at the end, is to take the Ready to Retire Wealthy online audit. So it's a free online test. It's got 30 odd questions. It takes just a couple of minutes to answer. It's on the website. We'll include a link in the show notes. And the reason for doing this is that no matter who you are or where you are in your life, it will give you an individual score as to how you are feeling. Let's say feeling rather than performing, feeling when measured against the 5 principles. So it'll ask you questions linked to each of the principles and then score you. And what you will find is that you are maybe slightly weaker in one of the principles or much stronger in one of the principles. And what you can then do, because you can enter the circle at any point that you like, you can choose what you want to work on. Do you want to work on identifying your resources, or are you very good at identifying your resources and now what you want to do is identify how you can make them work harder for you? Or are you very in control, you think, but you really don't have any clarity about for what reason? So if at the end of this you do one thing, please go and take the online audit and go through that process so that you can get your individual score. You will also get a personalized report that will then give you exercises or ideas about what you can do to improve your score against each of the principles. That alone will give you more clarity. So let me just talk to you about 1 or 2 people that I know. So let's think about Susie for a minute. Susie was a social worker when I met her, living an extremely stressful life. Her home life, great. Her work life, quite awful, as you can imagine, being a social worker, some of the things that she had to see and deal with and help distressed families. She came to me wanting initially to invest in property so that her husband could retire, so that they could replace his income, so that he could scale back and spend more time doing what he enjoys. The irony is that if we now come forward, say 6 years, I would say, Susie's got 6 properties, had them for a number of years, that actually these properties have enabled Susie to give up work. She gave up work years ago. As soon as the income from the properties kicked in, their whole financial situation changed, and it was Susie that then stepped back. And so really she's gone from an exhausted social worker to being retired and loving time with her grandchildren. And this is the interesting thing about clarity. She was very clear why she wanted to invest in property. But having gone through the process, actually, the clarity is completely different. She wanted to help her husband to retire, but in fact has retired herself. Now, this doesn't mean that going through the exercise of clarity is pointless, because the end result won't be what you start with. If you don't start with something, then you will never get set on the journey. Because Susie was very clear about what she wanted, she took those steps forward. The irony is that she got more than she bargained for at the other end. The outcome was even better than she thought. And let me give you an example of Ross. So Ross came to me, as a lot of men do, saying things like, I want to give up work. I don't see my children. He commuted to central London for a very intense job. Yes, he might have liked his job, but he realized that his children were getting older. He was missing out. And there were family stories where they would say, oh, we did this, we did that. But daddy wasn't there. He was missing out. And now, again, here we are, probably a bit longer for Ross. I would say somewhere between 6 and 8 years, maybe. He's got 5 properties, a mixture of buy-to-lets, HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. And what he thought he wanted to do was give up work. During the process, he actually changed jobs and took on yet another demanding role, and now has finally given up work completely and created his own business. So not only has he got his property business, he's now created another business on the side. And he feels like he's in control of his time. So the clarity was, I want to give up work. The irony is that he's given up one job and now created a new business. But what he's got is control of his time, the feeling like he is setting his own destiny, which he didn't have before. So clarity is really important. You might start with it, you might come to it halfway through, but it's very definitely a principle that puts a magnifying glass on everything. And in making it a magnifying glass, it brings it into focus and then speeds up the process. So not one to be missed. So let's have a look at control now. And you know that I love a bit of financial control. But the question here is, do you know exactly how much money you need, either now or in the future? We've got a lot of pressure on us at the moment, a lot of talk about prices rising and everything else. I've got 2 examples here for you of people that are in a good financial position and yet still understand the importance of constantly paying attention to their money. So financial control isn't just about when you're in debt or when you don't have enough money. I have clients that I have worked with who have had enormous credit card debt, and because they can't see their way through, they couldn't work out the strategies to get themselves back in control, get themselves in top of their financial situation, and I could help do that. But equally, you can have quite a significant amount of money and then be in a position where you recognize that this is one of your resources and you need to make it work in order that you can have the life that you want, the wealthy life. So John has been a client of mine again for a good 8 years, I would say. We worked together quite intensively at the beginning, then he disappeared because life changed, and he's a music producer and life was very busy in the music world. And then I think probably during the COVID years, he started reflecting on the performance of his property portfolios. He's done everything from developing his own properties to buy, sell, and hold, and had come to the point of thinking, well, he'd got cash in the bank, and the money that the cash in the bank was earning wasn't as much as the return that he could get from investing in property. So he came back to me and asked me to help him buy another 4 properties. He's got close to 10 or more. Now, what this does is this gives him the financial security to do the thing that he loves. And I suppose, as we've all learned through COVID, if you rely on any one thing, it's very easy for that thing to stop or change in a way that leaves you financially vulnerable. And so by having a decent property portfolio, John's in the position where he can focus on his music, but know that he's got the financial security for his family in the background. And then if I just explain Libby's story. So she doesn't live in this country. She's British and lives abroad, working incredibly hard, running a massive business abroad, but recognizes in her case that investing in property is what's going to give her a way to make her resources work harder, to give her financial income, but for her family, in her case, not for herself. She has 2 children, and what she wants to do is put them in the position where they have control of money rather than money controlling them, where they can understand their income and have the property portfolio so that they can make better choices. So whether you are doing this for yourself or in the future, and we had that conversation when I was talking to you about legacy. Legacy doesn't have to be way in the distance, it can be now. So in a sense, you've got the example here, even though it's under the control example of John investing in property now for the financial returns now, and Libby's doing it so that she's creating that long-term property portfolio for her family. So let's have a little look at assets. Now, assets are really around the time, the money, the property, the investments, everything that you have. And I'd ask you this question: do you know what assets you have? Do you know what your resources are? And are they working to support your wealth strategy? When did you last check? For example, whether you own your own home or your own property in a portfolio, did you leave it too late to remortgage? Did you not pay attention? And again, this sort of ties in with that conversation last week about the media, not being so strict that you never listen to the news, but listening to sufficient news that you get the information that you need. You should have been aware that interest rates were going to change, and you should have been able to make a decision quickly enough that you could remortgage. There are so many people that I speak to who are in the latter part of 2022 who are still just about getting around to the point where they need to remortgage. And of course, interest rates have already gone up several times in the past few months. You know, it's not that it's too late, better late than never, but it could have been a lot sooner if you were paying attention. So really understanding the role of your resources and how you're leveraging them. So let's have a look at Liz. So Liz is a busy osteopath, running a couple of clinics, and really wants to create a path to retirement, both for her and for her husband. And so they have looked at the resources they have and have been able to release equity, release money so that they can invest in property. And the cost of releasing the money, or not just having it sitting in the bank, is being offset by the profit of that money being invested in property. So the money is invested in property. The initial income pays for the loans for the properties, and then the profit that comes off the top pays back the cost or loss of money, loss of savings from the bank, but then still gives them additional money on the top of it. So overall, they have borrowed money, they've invested the money they've invested in properties is paid for by those properties, and then having paid for those properties, there's still profit that pays back either any original loans or loss of savings there, and there's still more money on the top of it. That's the art of leverage, to come out with more than you had in the first place, to take something and to lever it into a point where it is higher than it was. So that's the true art there. And then let's have a look at Alexi. So Alexi is a full-time computer analyst. He's now got 5 properties. I think we've been working together for 2 years. And we are working together to visualize an early retirement for him and his wife. Their desire is to move to Wales. It'd be interesting to see, like I said, with the clarity examples, if that's what it turns out to be when they get that far. But at the moment, the goal is to retire to Wales and to retire sooner than the mandatory retirement age. And so they are looking at the resources they have. They are leveraging them in a way that gives them the greater return, as I described earlier. And that money is not for now, for them, it is for the future. But the idea is it's not a distant future, it's a future that they're bringing forward. They are looking at how they can use properties to bring forward their retirement. And there's quite a theme here from Liz looking at retirement, and before that Ross looking to leave work, which in a sense is retirement. Even way back at the beginning, the first example, Susie looking to retire. And the word retirement really is an abbreviation. It's an abbreviation for all of these people. And what the unpacked word means is to change the situation I am in now into a situation where I am more in control of my time, more in control of my money, and I can create the life that I want to live. And I've put the label on that of a wealthy life, a life where when you have all the time that you want and all the money that you want, you're in a position where you can choose how to spend your time. And then ironically, as in Ross's example, from saying I want to retire, which theoretically sounds like give up work, he's then set up another business. But he's in a position now where it's his choice. And that's why I say it's quite interesting what Alexi and his wife will do, because what they're saying is they want to give up work. They're quite young. They're probably, dare I guess out loud, late 30s, early 40s, something like that. That's very early to retire and do nothing. So what's going to happen is they don't know that they're saying this really. They want to change the situation they're in now, maybe where they live, maybe what they do, into something else. They think at the moment that that is retiring to a Welsh, let's call it homestead. They want some more land. What they will do once they get to that point is where you come back round the circle and they'll gain more clarity again. Because once you step away from the situation you're in that you don't want, and you step into a situation that you said you want, you have almost taken another stepping stone forward towards this ideal life. It could be that that's it. That is your ideal life. And you will just retire to Wales and keep some animals, and that will be fine. But equally, it could be that you then create another business or another form of generating income, which ultimately becomes a business. So really interesting. But it all starts with recognizing the resources you've got, working out how well they're working and where you can make them work harder for you, using those resources to become more financially resilient, and of course ultimately creating that legacy, that life that you want to live at the other end. And so this brings us to the 5th principle, which is legacy. And if I ask you this question, do you feel you have enough? Now, enough is quite an emotive word, evocative. We often use it in the sentence that means negative and lack. I don't have enough. There isn't enough. We tend to use it to mean not enough, a gap, a lack. But in actual fact, having enough is actually a positive, because if you have enough, you have money, you have time, you have enough friends, you have enough love, you have enough good health, you have whatever it is that you want. Having more than enough is amazing. Having much more than enough is exceptional and wonderful. But if you don't feel that you have enough, you're actually focused on the gap. And I guarantee you that you do have enough. And I know that you have enough. And there's a measure, and I say this wherever I speak, and I will tell you this on the podcast. The fact that you are listening to this podcast means, one, you have enough time to listen to it. Two, you have enough money to have bought a device and connect it to the internet so that you can listen. And I bet this is always a tricky one, and it works very well when I'm speaking at an event. It might not work so well at home because theoretically you could even be in the bath. But normally, if you were to look down at your feet, you would have shoes on, or at least socks on, or maybe even shoes and socks on, or some variation of that. And if you have that, and then when you look up, you have a roof above your head, you have enough. Of course, this won't work if you're in the bath with no shoes on. Most people don't wear shoes in the bath, or if you're sitting outside and you don't have a roof above your head. But then you're sitting in a chair, you're sitting in a bath, you have, trust me, you have enough. There are many, many, many more people in this planet that do not actually genuinely have enough food to eat, enough to create an actual home for them. If you've ever seen any of the properties in sort of South Africa or Africa, if you've ever traveled and you see people living in properties where they've literally got scraps of wood and corrugated metal and sheets of plastic to create a space that is slightly protected from the elements, you have enough. You have enough. Now, whether you are living the life that you want is another matter. So therefore, the question then becomes, do you feel like you have enough? And if the answer is yes, great. We'll go on to the second question in a minute. But if the answer is no, then I would take you back to the episode last week of mindset, and let's start digging in. Where is the programming that is telling you that you don't have enough? How are you spending your time? I spoke to you about the daily mind. How are you using your daily mind that you're in a position where you don't feel that you have enough? What's the daily mind doing that it isn't helping you have enough? And if you do have enough, that's great. And as I say, I hold the belief that you have enough. Whether you join me in that or not, I don't know. What would you do if you didn't have to work another day just to pay the bills? So if you sort of really think about that question, we are trained, and I've said this before, to leave school to get a job, and we are in some ways controlled to keep that job, to keep working, because we have to have a house, we have to be able to afford a house. Typically, we are driven towards buying a home on a mortgage, and then that means that we have to keep working to pay the mortgage back. And then we have to buy stuff, and then that stuff is bought often with debt. So then we have to keep working in order to pay back that debt. And it just goes on and on and on. But what if I could just say to you, let's just stop a minute. I'm not going to say a lottery win because that implies millions and millions and millions. It doesn't have to be millions. What if you didn't have to work just to pay the bills? Do you know how much your bills are? And if we just say the number 2,000, so if your number's 2,000, do you have 2,000 income, which would be enough to cover the bills? It might not be enough to go out for a meal or to buy new shoes or to have a treat or to replace the car, but it would cover your living expenses. It would cover your utility bills. It would cover your food bills and essential costs. When you can generate that 2,000 without having to actually hold down a job or run a business on a full-time basis, your thinking kicks up a gear. And you know why? Because if we go back to the episode last week, you're not worrying here at a subconscious level about, have I got enough money? Have I got enough money? Because I've been told I'll never be rich, I'll never have enough money, I'll never be successful. You're not down at that level of thinking, because you have at least £2,000 to cover the cost of your bills. You're not up here in the daily thinking of, oh, I've got a job, I've got to do this, I'm running a business, I've got to do that. You're not stuck in that level of thinking, and therefore you step up a gear. You're in positive, creative thinking mode, because all the worry is taken away. Then it's up to you. If you want to go on and find a way to generate still more income, you're absolutely able to do that, entitled to do that, capable of doing that. If the mindset isn't there, then it makes everything else much harder. And this principle is about legacy. It's about creating a life of your choosing. So a dear friend and client is called Tom. I've spoken about him on many occasions. And he was originally a BBC sound engineer. And he likes to tell the story that he had a midlife crisis, started writing books, and he's now a philanthropist. And to me, being a philanthropist is sort of the epitome of a wealthy life, of living a legacy. And we've spoken about legacy. What does legacy mean for you? If legacy starts to take on the meaning of how you live your daily life, and how in living your daily life you are impacting on the lives of others, those closest to you. So a role model to your children, the supporter of your children, the supporter of your parents and wider family, the supporter and role model maybe of friends and those in the community. And maybe you even take it a step further and, like Tom, take a skill that you have in creating meditations, find an organization, in this case an American app called Insight Timer, load your meditations to that for free, because you don't need to earn the money to pay the bills because you have enough. And before you know it, millions, is this possible? Millions of people will then have downloaded your meditations so that you are in a position where the impact of something, don't get me wrong, he's clearly talented by being a sound engineer. That has made the whole path to creating meditations and podcasts and all of that stuff a lot easier. He's not had to struggle with sort of the technology because he had those skills. But he's learned about meditation. He's learned about mindset. He creates the music. He puts out this gift literally for the world. That is a living legacy. He's still alive. He's still doing this. And every day, I can't even tell you how many people on a daily basis will be benefiting from the gift that he is putting out there. Isn't this the ultimate in a legacy, a wealthy life, a wealthy retirement strategy even? And again, there is a degree of property in here, but it's more about, he started to do something that he loved. He got himself to that position. He was writing the books. Some income came through the books. From the income of the books, he started to do the meditations. From the meditations, which were for free, then people have bought courses. That's generated a bit more income. He's very aware of his financial situation, and he does now have a position where he's got a home and a rental property as well. And then let me just briefly share my story, because I know you'll have heard it a lot. How did I go from benefit mum to author to speaker to having a wealthy life? And the answer is quite simply clarity, control, leveraging my resources. And I hope I'm leaving a legacy. I hope that this podcast is helping you, and therefore I am right now leaving a legacy. I'm not going to wait until I finally die. We're all living so much longer. Who wants to wait until you're 80, 90, 100 before other people get to see the benefit of your life? I want to live my legacy now, not just in sharing the podcast and my thoughts through books and helping people through conversations and working with me and helping them create property portfolios, if that's as far as we go, but also the things that I do in my local village, like the community group that I've set up around how we can become more, I don't know, climate aware through our gardens, through what we're doing, generating that conversation and looking at how I can be involved in the community. And I can be involved in the community because knowing how much I need, what is enough, having leveraged my resources so that they bring money in so that I don't have to work every day just to pay the bills, means that I have time in the week and at the weekend to do other things that enable me to leave that legacy. Think about this podcast, for example. There is no direct financial benefit to me doing the podcast. It's not something charged for, it's free. Therefore, it is in the true spirit of philanthropy and legacy. And I can do that because I know that I have tenants in my properties paying my rent on a monthly basis, and that rent pays for the loan on that house and leaves a surplus, and that surplus eventually filters its way down to me to pay for me to have today to record this podcast for free for you, because effectively my tenants have paid me to have this time to do this. So it's about, when do you want your legacy to be present in the world? And that's what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. So this is a whistle top tour, as I said. If you go back to episodes 12 to 16, you can start to get into the details of each of these 5 principles if any of these don't make sense. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, the online audit, the readiness to retire wealthy audit, and we'll put a link in the show notes, is a way for you to assess yourself against these 5 principles, identify where there might be a slightly weaker principle for you, go back, pick up the podcast, re-listen to that podcast, look at the personalized report that you'll receive, put those things into action. I can't do any more for you. Now you need to take this over. Now you need to take ownership of this. Now you need to get the clarity about what you want, get in control of whatever part of your life you need to get in control of, identify your resources and make sure that they are working hard for you. And then when you're ready, in whatever way it manifests for you, embody your legacy, live your legacy right now, and love every minute of it. And I really hope that this webinar on this podcast has inspired you, encouraged you, maybe helped you, advised you, awakened you to the idea that you can live the wealthy life that you want. The easy way to do it: take the audit, find out where your area of weakness is, address it, and start enjoying life. And if you've then listened to the other 2 podcasts that have previous before this, use the news for your own purposes. Be aware of what's going on, but don't get dragged into the drama. Don't get dragged into the negativity. You can live a positive, wealthy life moving forward if you choose to. It is totally in your hands, and I am here to help you. So as always, I'd like to thank you for your time. My name's Vicky Wushay. You've been listening to A Wealthy Life. I am so grateful for your time, and I hope that in return, you feel that you will have had a little bit more whoosh in your life. I look forward to speaking to you next week.